Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. Want to improve your organization's customer service? Looking for insider tips to knock your customer socks off? Then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Yannick Grant.
Welcome to Navigating the Customer Experience. On today's episode, our guest is Steve Cockram. Steve is an inspirational communicator, serial entrepreneur, confidant to elite leaders around the world, and co-creator of the world's premier leadership toolkit. He has co-authored The 100X Leader, 5 Voices and 5 Gears with his business partner, Jeremie Kubicek. Their new book, The Communication Code, released in November of 2023. So without further delay, sit back, plug your earphones in, and let's jump right into this conversation with Steve. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Yannick. Lovely to be with you.
All right, Steve. So we always like to give our guests an opportunity to share in their own words a little bit about their journey, how you got from where you were to where you are today.
Gosh, what an interesting question that is. Nobody unique would ever in their right mind have done all the things I've done in the last 30 years. So I'll give you the highlights. I was a school teacher, an entrepreneur, a nightclub owner, a pastor, a coach, consultant, and have been running Giant really with Jeremie for the last 11 years. So always say if you were to meet my friends at the age of 30 and ask who would be the least likely guru on relational intelligence, probably I would be in everyone's top 3. So everything we've learned usually has come out of our own personal failure, Unique, and trying to work out why human beings behave the way they do, and also how can we help people do relationships better in every area of their life. That's really been the heart and the joy of the last few years.
All right. So your new book that was mentioned in reading your bio, The Communication Code, right?
Yes, correct.
You wrote it with your business partner, Jeremie Kubicek. Could you share with us a little bit about that book, maybe 3 overarching themes or tenets that the book focuses on, and kind of who is the book geared towards?
Okay, so we would kind of say the book is for anyone who is involved in any form of human interaction and relationship, i.e. everyone. Premise you need would be...
That's the whole world.
Yeah, I mean, we write for leaders really, but I honestly believe of all the resources we've created, this is probably the one that leaders apply most in their home relationships as much as they do anywhere else. So the premise, I'll give you a couple of things. One is that transmission of information is not the same as effective communication. So just because you've sent information to someone does not mean that they've understood the intent with which you sent it or your expectations as to how you would wish them to respond. So we use the analogy of saying, if you think of a communication code, for those of you sort of like the Enigma machine or a code breaker, if I could send to you, Unique, a code, a communication code in advance of the transmission of information, which shared with you how I would like you to respond, we are more likely to meet each other in the middle and communicate effectively. So the basic premise is there are 5 communication codes, each come with clues. So if I said to you, Unique, I'm going to send this to you, I want you to critique it. I want you to tell me why it's not going to work. You won't hurt my feelings. It goes live in 2 hours. If there's mistakes, I want to know. Full critique invited. Second one is collaboration, where basically I say, Unique, I've been working on something. I think it's pretty good, but I think you can bring things that will make it better. So full collaboration, please help make this better, whatever that is. Clarify is if I say to you, Unique, do you know, I've got something really important to share. I don't think it's going to come out perfectly first time. Would you ask great questions? Don't try and critique or collaborate too soon. Make sure, help me get out what I'm really trying to say, because clarification is usually the ability to ask good questions before you launch into something else. Care is the 4th communication code, which says, this is the one I got wrong many, many times, Unique, where just because someone is transmitting information to me doesn't mean they want me to fix them, solve them, or be their consultant. Care means, Steve, what I'm struggling right now, what I'm going to say to you probably bears no resemblance to what the real issues are. I just need to know that somebody cares enough about me to be present, to listen, not try and solve me, not try and fix me. Then the last one was celebrate, which is I might say to Unique, hey, before we go on, this is really important to me, and I'd love us to take a moment to celebrate something really special, not move on too quickly and go. So the idea being is you'd be amazed if you add 5 communication codes that you send in advance of the transmission of your information. You will find that basically relationships that you struggle with at work, with the people you lead, even the people you have at home, you will be amazed what happens when you actually give them clues as to how you want them to respond. So there you go. That's the quickest overview I've ever given, Unique, of the communication code book. So apologies if that was longer than you were hoping, but I hope it at least whets your appetite.
It did. So just run back through the 5 C's for me. You said critique, collaboration. What was the third one?
Clarify,
Clarify.
care, and celebrate.
Awesome. All right.
What happens, Unique, is that all of us have default communication codes that are wired into our personality. So when I don't think about it, I automatically try and collaborate, but it's experienced as critique. My wife, for her, care is number one and clarify is number two. So when people present to me things that they're struggling with, unless I'm intentional, I will usually try and solve their problems. And it's
Hmm.
amazing how often that goes wrong because I'm not actually able to meet the expectations, unspoken, by the way, of the person on the other side of me. And just for every leader, every day, when you're managing people in different contexts, will almost always end up with miscommunication. This is just simple. Children can learn it and understand it. We use it at home the whole time. And it's been transformative. So that's why we share it.
Now, you mentioned the 5 C's, right? In terms of communication code. If someone wanted to
Yeah.
know what was their primary code, right? Because you said your primary one is collaboration, but it's received as critique, and your wife's is care and clarify. So if I wanted to know, or one of our listeners wanted to know, well, what's my primary communication code? How do I know? Is there like a test that you can do?
There is. Yeah, if you go to giantworldwide.com, there's a free assessment there. Oh, it might be actually giantos.com. So there's a free assessment, but in a sense, and I'll put it in the show notes, I'll send it to you. But it's really interesting when actually you begin to think about the transmission of the communication. A lot of leaders think by sending an email, they've communicated effectively. And the reality is, the moment you grasp as a leader that transmission is not the same as effective communication, you ought to begin to think, how could I use this? Now, I'll even use it, Unique, with people who haven't learned the communication code. I'll say to them, hey, before I respond to you this moment, you've asked me for this. Can I just be clear? Are you hoping, what do you hope happens here? Are you asking me just to listen and be a good friend or a good boss? Are you asking me to celebrate with you? Do you want me to ask good questions? Are you asking me to help make it better? Or do you just want me to tell you why I think it will or won't work? So if you think about it, you can become intentional immediately. And amazingly, when people believe that you are more relationally intelligent as a leader, you'll be amazed at how much your influence grows with the teams and the people you lead every day. It's an amazing what people do when they feel that they're being listened to, heard, and that you're committed to trying to really hear what they're trying to say rather than what I guess I used to do, which was just respond with whatever I thought was most appropriate in the moment or whatever pressure I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, a big part of communication, Steve, and I'm kind of bringing this back to customer experience, right? Typically,
Mhm.
a customer will reach out to an organization for primarily two reasons. To make a request, it could be for an existing service that they have with your company or
Mhm.
product, or it could be for a new service that they're seeking to attain. Or they're
Mhm.
calling because they have a problem and they would like it resolved. So
Yeah.
primarily those are like the two, channels that customers will reach out to you for. So what do you think is critical in customer experience? If we were to look at the different code, channels that you spoke to us about, the 5 C's, do you think they're all critical, or do you think there may be one or two that, definitely must occur in that interaction?
It's a really good question. My instinct, Unique, is to say that clarify is probably the place to start
Mm-hmm.
because, in a sense, the clarification is what do they really wanting to happen? What are they really hoping happens? And I guess asking the right questions in the beginning. For those of us who are problem solvers, we tend to launch into problem solving quickly. And I would say that really understanding, well, is this, is somebody just wanting a rant? Does somebody just want to have their pound of flesh and get that off there? And I just need to sit there and care and not try and solve it? Or do they have a specific problem that they really hope I can help them with? And I think it's unlikely that celebrate is going to be the agenda, but it would be nice if they were ringing up to say how amazing they think your product is. But I would say probably the clarify is where you start, and making a judgment of whether what this person really wants is just you to listen, or whether they're actually more likely inviting you beyond the initial clarification into a collaborative process. How do I help bring a resolution to the reason that you are contacting customer service? Now, I think the other one, I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but you'd be amazed how many people will spend an awful long time waiting to get through to a customer service line. So I think sometimes a disarming connection of saying, I'm so sorry. I'm aware you might have waited a long time. I would love to be able to do everything I can to help you resolve whatever the issues are. I always think that goes a long way with me when someone at least recognizes that I've probably been on the call longer than I was hoping I would be.
Agreed. So I'm happy you said clarify, because the question I really wanted to ask you, but I kind of wanted to hear what you would have said based on, the customer experience approach is, when you're explaining to me the 5 C's just now, and you said, in terms of communicating, you have to be really good at asking questions. And it has been my experience as a customer service trainer, and even as a podcaster, I must say I've gotten much better at doing it over the years. But I find a lot of people who are in customer service practitioner roles struggle with this. Like, how can you improve on the ability or the competence of asking the right types of questions? Because that's critical to the whole communication process. If you're not asking the right questions, then you're not going to get the right responses to get to the solution.
Yes. You actually need to master your content and the products of which you are going to be answering people's questions. I think if people get through, there's a competency filter, which means do you know how to help somebody in that process?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's different again whether you're doing it online or telephone, or whether you're maybe in a physical place. Like if I go to the Apple store and the geeks help me. There's different things I would say, depending on whether it's face to face or whether more likely it's even just over a phone. Because I think you have to remember is that communication, only 10% of communication is the words that are used, 35% is the tone with which the words are offered, and then 55% is the non-verbal communication, body language. So when you're delivering customer service and all you have is tone of voice and words, you're already having to work hard to really understand what is it this person is seeking to communicate. So for me, I think the communication code is potentially really helpful, because it's almost taking the time to clarify and ask the question to really make sure you understand what the intent and the expectation. So there's the two things that I'm always trying to understand when someone's speaking to me. What is their intent, really? And what is their expectation of this engagement, even if I know they probably won't tell me, or they may be unaware of even knowing what it is in the first place. It's the reason communication is so difficult to train, but it's also how people have tools unique. It becomes really significant when people are able to begin to decode what is the intent, what is the expectation. And in my world, obviously, you alluded to something called 5 Voices. I've spent about the last 20, 25 years trying to work out why humans behave the way they do, and understanding that different personalities react very predictably to different interactions. Now, that's probably a high level of sales skills, and customer service is a degree of sales if you think about it. But actually, there's another piece that if people want to add skills, begin to listen to the words that people use, whether that's in the way that neuro-linguistic programming would start to think about, do they talk about what they see, what they hear, or are they more kinesthetic? And in our language of voices, I'm listening for what type of personality is presenting themselves to me in the way that they engage and the way they communicate. So I would argue that in any human interaction, the person communicating and transmitting to you is giving you lots of clues. The question is, to your point, how much time do we really spend listening and trying to understand and discern who this person is, what their intent, what the expectations, before we launch into probably what they were expecting, which is a more collaborative approach to how do we help resolve their issue, bearing in mind that the presenting issue may not be the real issue.
All right. Awesome response. Thank you so much, Steve.
Sorry. I'm kind of going, there's so much in this, but
Yeah.
here's the thing I would encourage to anyone who's really interested in developing their skills in this area. I am your kind of beacon of hope because I'm like 24 years on now into this as one of the least relationally intelligent people by nature, sadly, by personality. And actually, now many would say, I think really hard about it because I've really had to learn how to do it. I think the things that don't come naturally to you, you often end up being a better teacher and coach because you've actually had to wrestle and struggle with your own inability at my time to listen. We have a tool in our toolbox called the boomerang effect, which is another, learn to be interested before trying to be interesting. It's like relational intelligence 101. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's, it's amazing how often people want to talk to you about them. And whatever you say, it reminds them of them and where they've been. That's another area I think that I'm not sure whether customer experience particularly, but as a communication tip,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing what happens when you meet people who are interested in you more than trying to be tell you how interesting they are.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said that because one of my very favorite books, and I try to read it at least once per year, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Mhm.
And he talks about that in his book. And I mean, that book was published from like 1933. So, it's
Absolutely.
it's amazing that that fundamentally is still the case today because we are true and true human beings. And as you mentioned before, some traits are just, predictable.
They are, and I think that's the bit which human behavior unique is more predictable than any of us would ever give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the bit where I don't know whether you ever watched the film called The Matrix,
I
but
have,
it's
yes.
the moment you begin to understand why human beings behave the way they do, it's a little bit like the green letters and numbers coming down the screen,
Mm-hmm.
and you begin to watch human interaction in different dynamics in different ways, and you suddenly begin to realize actually it's more predictable, and therefore if it's predictable, it can be learned, and that actually without it being manipulative, we can actually really work on being far more relationally intelligent, and that will help us in every aspect of our leadership, whether we're working with our teams or whether we're working at home or whether we're ourselves engaging with clients and customers. But fundamentally, I would argue now, Unique, that relational intelligence is now become even more important than classic IQ.
Yeah.
AI does so much now. I don't know how much you play with it, but in our world, it's ridiculous how intelligent AI is becoming.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing it doesn't do well, it doesn't do the relational intelligence piece as well as human beings do. And I'm not convinced it'll ever replace it. All I know is it's becoming. I often say that basically the ability to establish, maintain, and develop long-term relationships inside and outside your organization is the primary currency of wealth and influence in the new world.
I love it. All right. Thank you, Steve. Now, Steve, could you
Pleasure.
share could you share with us what's the one online resource, tool, website, or app that you absolutely can't live without in your own business?
So the difference in the geeks who run my business are, I try to think what for me, I think 1Password as a middle-aged man is the app that I love the most. Unique. I looked in before and I have 376 logins and various secure pieces of data in one app, which basically means I don't have to try and have 357 passwords identical. So
Yeah.
1Password for me is the best. I don't know what it is, 3.99 a month, but actually. That makes me feel more secure and safe online. That's me personally. The business, I think if you were to speak to our team at the moment of building an app, they use a software called Framer, which I'm an expert in, but it's a way in which you can see what technology in the app will be and do and look like before you actually have to actually engage in building the coding. So I'm a massive fan of Framer, even though I'm not the person who actually runs it. There's some far younger, clever UI UX developers who do all that work, but fundamentally, I'm always massively impressed with what Framer does.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, could you share with our listeners as well, Steve, what's the one thing that's going on in your life right now that you're really excited about? Either something you're working on to develop yourself or your people.
Gosh, is a great question. Well, I think that I probably alluded to it, Unique, in the sense that we have worked for years to try and codify tools to help leaders do a better job in the visual world we live in. What we're working on at the moment, and this is the thing which I smile as I say it, we've run a B2B business up until this point. We've licensed kind of coaches, consultants to use our stuff, but we're building a B2C app at the moment, which will take all of the Jedi mind tricks of the last 20 years about why people behave the way they do. We'll take the best of our tools, the best of what AI is able to do, and we will create a Five Voices app, which will come your way later this year, which basically is your personalized um, coach in relation to it will know your personality and your wiring, and it will basically customize content and learning for you and allow you to access it in the way that you most love to learn. So if you want podcasts, ebooks, audiobooks, but the idea really of actually rather than having to read one book, and we all read the same thing, I'm watching the ability to customize content in form and style that is unique to you as an individual. And I've never seen that before. So I think Communication Code will be the last book we write in the late industrial format of a published book. I think the new world will customize content for individuals in formats and voices even and length of time. You'll be able to have your daily version of encouragement that will come straight to you, Unique, when it comes. So that's what the team's working on at the moment. I get to see, all the progress week by week, and minimum viable product is going to be ready for mid-May. So watch this space for personality-driven growth customized to you.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Now, Steve, our listeners would have tapped into this episode and they would like to connect with you online. Where can they find you online?
Easiest one is probably LinkedIn. Steve Cockram, you can find me. If anyone wants my email, you can write to my personal one, steve@giantworldwide.com. I love it when people who hear things reach out and say, that was helpful, that wasn't. But basically, I can connect you with all kinds of resources if any of this was helpful. So Steve Cockram on LinkedIn or steve@giantworldwide.com, which will go through. No EA will filter your email. That one comes straight to me. So there we go.
Perfect. All right. Now, before we wrap our episodes up, Steve, we always like to ask our guests, do you have a quote or a saying that during times of adversity or challenge, you'll tend to revert to this quote? If for any reason you got derailed or you got off track, the quote kind of helps to get you back on track. Do you have one of those?
I've got plenty of those, but probably the most common one is the Theodore Roosevelt quote when he talks about if he's going to fail, he would rather fail while daring greatly than be counted among those cold, timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. So that's what I go back to and just go, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail while daring greatly, going after something big enough that actually could make a dent and for good in the world.
All right. Fantastic. So we will definitely have that quote in the show notes of this episode. So just want to extend our deepest gratitude to you, Steve, for taking time out of your very busy schedule and coming on our podcast and sharing about your book and the communication code, the 5 C's that you mentioned, how it works, the inner workings of why it's important to listen, asking the right questions, understanding that relational communication is definitely, the epitome of where we're moving forward to in this world, and just how, as human beings, we can utilize a lot of the cues and clues that are given to us to improve on how it is that we transmit the communication with each other. So it was really, really insightful, and I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick, and well done for listening so well and reflecting back. You listened to all that I said, so thank you for being a great question asker and interviewer.
Thank you too. Just want to remind our listeners, you can feel free to follow us on Twitter at NavigatingX, or you can also join our private Facebook group, Navigating the Customer Experience Community. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant. We also have a new book available on Amazon, The ABCs of a Fantastic Customer Experience. It's available in ebook and paperback. So if you want to increase revenue in your organization, build a stronger service culture, and create employees or develop employees who are really mastering service delivery in your business, you need to grab a copy of this book. Until next time, I'm your host, Yannick Grant.
Thanks for listening. For more awesome resources to take your customer service game to another level, head over to navigatingthecustomerexperience.com. See you next time.